Everybody knows that the junk wax era was a time of overproduction for baseball cards. But in this video, we're going to talk about the few rare cards that are hard to find from that era in good condition. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me back on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. The junk wax era. Now, that is a term that defines the late 80s and early 1990s, in baseball especially, and other sports as well. But it was a time of overproduction. These manufacturing companies just overprinted almost every card out there. But I've had this idea rolling around in my head for a while about a handful of cards that are actually really hard to find, at least in good enough condition to be graded in a high grade. I'm not sure exactly why that's the case for a lot of these, but there are a handful that really stood out to me as difficult to find in great condition. And so I wanted to put a list of those cards together for this video. I had a hard time coming up with what exactly to call this because it's not exactly rare cards. These cards in many cases are ones that can be found in a huge number of collectors' closets, probably stored in boxes somewhere. But for whatever reason, the cards that have been submitted for grading have had a really hard time at getting a gem mint grade. Now, I do want to make something clear right at the beginning. There are some sets out there that are just incredibly short printed, even from the junk wax era. Cards like the Topps Tiffany or Fleer Glossy were cards that were manufactured at a much smaller number compared to their alternative base cards. But that's not really what I'm talking about here. And there's a lot of cards that came in the early 90s that are even serial number too. And so I'm not really talking about rarity in terms of actually having a hard time finding the cards to begin with. I'm talking about cards that should be readily available, but they're just not easy to find, especially in those gem mint condition. Even cards like O-Pee-Chee and Leaf, the Canadian counterpart of the US release, were printed in lower quantities, and the prices do reflect this in a lot of cases, but that's still not specifically what I'm talking about here. I wanted to talk about cards that aren't necessarily rare in terms of overall numbers produced, but they are rare to find in high grades, either because of condition sensitivity or current stars or current sets that are sought after, but they weren't originally that popular, and so they weren't taken care of all that often or graded all that often in the 90s. Almost every basic set from this era has at least a handful, in some cases a couple hundred cards graded of every star. And a lot of those star cards are very high in the gem rate percentage, simply because these are cards not really worth submitting unless you collect that player specifically. And when someone does, they think they have a really great example of that card that they think will get a gem mint, so that's what they submit. But there are some cards out there that no matter how many get submitted, it's just really tough to get those gem mint grades. One of the obvious ones we could talk about is the 1991 Fleer Pro Vision. These are not rare at all. They came with 4 in every $20 box, but there is a reason why PSA 10s cost what they do. Because when you look at the PSA Pop report, you can see they have an extremely low gem rate compared to the number of cards actually submitted. And the reason for that really low gem rate, those black borders and especially the back were extremely prone to chipping. And poor centering was always an issue in the junk wax era as well. And let me show you this. The number of cards being submitted over the last few years has skyrocketed for these Provisions. And that's because some folks out there have realized the potential of opening old boxes of 91 Fleer for perfectly conditioned Provision cards. But despite all these new submissions, gem mint examples have continued to be very hard to come by. Those gem mint copies have increased only slightly compared to the overall number of cards submitted for grading. Another good example is the 1991 Studio Jeff Bagwell rookie card. For years, there were only about 5 of these graded in PSA 10, making them extremely hard to come by to finish the Jeff Bagwell rookie card set registry on PSA. And they were valued as such, often costing well over $500 per card in gem mint condition. And that still continues to be the case, even though collectors have broken hundreds of these boxes over the last 5 years or so since the huge pandemic explosion to increase the overall graded population of these Bagwell rookies to about 500, while the gem mint population has only gone to 29. This video is about cards similar to those, but for whatever reason, they still seem to be overlooked, and they're often generally affordable despite their scarcity in higher grades. Those Provisions and Bagwells will cost you a pretty penny, but these cards that I'm going to talk about may not. And they are important cards. They're not 1990 Fleer Jose Uribe cards. These are cards that many collectors out there may actually want. Many of them Hall of Fame player key cards or even rookie cards. Now, before I jump into the 20 cards, let me share with you an example. This isn't a huge card. It's not a star card anymore, but at one time it was. The 1993 Bowman Ryan Klesko is a great example. This guy was a monster for collectors in the 90s. Total PSA population of 709, 425 of those PSA 9s. But there are no PSA 10 examples. Out of 700 plus cards, how could you not have any? So that's an extreme example of the kind of card we're talking about here today. Now, first up, let's talk about the 1988 Leaf Rickey Henderson card. Everybody knows this set, that ugly blue border for 88 Donruss, but this is the Leaf counterpart printed in Canada that I mentioned before. For whatever reason, there have been 24 graded by PSA, 16 of which have been 9s, but nobody has been able to get a Gem Mint 10 on this card. I've opened up a few boxes myself, and they are incredibly off-center almost all the time. SGC is graded 4, they've only had 8.5 as their highest grade, and BGS and CGC haven't graded any. Now, I will grant you that this is not a huge card in terms of people clamoring to get it, but there are a lot of Rickey Henderson collectors out there, and it's a pretty key card in his run. But when you compare this to other 1988 Leaf cards, the overall set has a gem rate of about 33%. And for whatever reason, the gem rate for the Henderson is 0. Now, the next one up on my list is actually a set of cards, and I'm going to be running out a number of these that are full sets rather than a single card. And that's the 1991 Score Hot Rookies. These, I believe, were inserted into jumbo packs. And the key card in this set is Frank Thomas. It's a pretty desirable card to go get, especially early on in his career. The total PSA population of all the cards in this set is 131, with only 6 of them graded PSA 10. That is a 4.6% gem rate. And out of that 131, 110 of them are the Frank Thomas, with only 5 of those graded PSA 10s. 4.5% gem rate for that Frank Thomas. SGC is not too different. 27 submitted, only 110 for a 3.7% gem rate. BGS has 30, 2 of them were graded BGS 9.5s, and CGC surprisingly has 7 of these with 2 CGC 10s for a 28.6% gem rate. But overall here, the gem rate among all the companies is 5.6%, making these really hard to find in good condition. Now, the next one up on my list, and by the way, I'm going through these chronologically if you haven't been able to tell yet, but the next one is another Rickey Henderson card from 1991 Studio. This is the same set that Jeff Bagwell had a really hard time getting gems in, and the Rickey Henderson from that same set is even harder. There's been 34 total submitted to PSA and 9 PSA 9s. Once again for this Henderson, 0 gem mints. SGC has 2 submitted, they both came back 9s, and none submitted to BGS or CGC. So once again for this Rickey, no gems. The gem rate for all other studio cards from this set is 28%, making the Rickey Henderson really different from all those other cards. The Studio is another box that I've opened up several times. These are plagued by all sorts of issues. Miscuts, really bad centering, a lot of scratches on the surface straight out of the pack. So there's lots of reasons why these could be graded in poor condition. But compared to all the other stars from this set, it really doesn't explain why the Rickey Henderson can't get gemmed. All right, the next one is another set. And we're actually going to talk about a whole series of sets here, but we're going to focus on one at the end. That's the 1992 Fleer insert sets. Fleer had horrible quality control in this year specifically. They typically did, but you look across the board, a number of their insert cards are extremely hard to find in good condition straight out of the pack. There's a Roger Clemens tribute set, and specifically this card, Cooperstown Bound, is the hardest one with no gems yet. The Team Leaders insert set was really difficult as well. Griffey and Ripken specifically, it's really hard to find high quality cards in that insert set. But the one I've focused on here is the Fleer All-Stars insert set. This was a key insert set for Fleer for many years, and I think that this actually had the best design year in 1992. But opening these out of the pack, they are again horribly plagued by being off center, by being miscut, and have chipping all over the front, the back, and the foil as well. Out of a total of 329 submitted to PSA, you've only got 7 that have made a PSA 10 grade. That's a 2.1% gem rate. Look at the other graded companies, SGC, there's 44 submitted, only 1 SGC 10. BGS has 49, and there's 5 BGS 9 as the highest grade, so no gems in all of those 49 BGS submitted. CGC has had 2 submitted, and the highest grade is a CGC 8. So the overall gem rate for all of the cards in this set is 1.9%. I love this set, and I would love to be able to collect all the cards in high grades, but I just can't. You can't find them. I've even tried to submit a handful of these on my own, and the best grade that I've come back with is a PSA 8.5, which essentially has stopped me from submitting any more for the time being. Now, we talked about a couple Fleer insert sets from 92. There's one more I want to talk about, but I wanted to talk about this one a little bit separately because they were inserted into jumbo packs only. And it was one of the insert sets that created the insert craze of the early to mid 1990s. And that is the 1992 Fleer Rookie Sensations. The key cards in this one, Frank Thomas, Jeff Bagwell, and Ivan Rodriguez, all have really early year cards in this set. The total PSA population is just under 1,200, and there's only been 17 PSA 10s out of all of those for a gem rate of 1.4%. SGC is at 120 submitted. The best grade, there's 1 SGC 9.5. BGS, 247 submitted. There have only been 3 BGS 9.5 or higher. And I put the plus here because there's actually 1 BGS 10 pristine Frank Thomas. I can't imagine what that card would go for on the open market, given how scarce these are in high grades. And then finally, CGC has 4 that have been submitted, and the highest grade is a CGC 8.5, making the overall gem rate for this set 1.3%. 92 Fleer had a really hard time with all these, but those 92 Fleer All-Stars and the Rookie Sensations, if you find them in great condition in your own collection or open a box, look to get those submitted because they will be worth a pretty penny. Now for the next one on my list. 92 was a rookie year for somebody that I think has a great shot of getting into the Hall of Fame next year in 2026, and that is Jeff Kent. He's going to be eligible for the first time on a Veterans Committee ballot, and I think he's the type of guy that a lot of those voters would typically vote for. Now, a tough card of his is the 92 Pinnacle base card. 152 submitted to PSA and only 28 PSA 10s, but that's still a gem rate of 18.4. By far the hardest rookie card for Jeff Kent is actually his 1992 Leaf Gold version. These cards are incredibly tough with those black borders that are prone to chipping, and especially that gold foil, which is missing or spotty in a lot of cases. There's a total PSA population of 50 with only 4 graded PSA 10s, which is pretty crazy for a key player's rookie card that could get into the Hall of Fame. That's a gem rate of 8%. SGC has 3 submitted with a 9 being the highest grade. BGS has 4 submitted with 2 8.5s the highest grade. And CGC has had 2 submitted with an 8 being the highest grade, making these cards extremely difficult to get into Gem Mint cards. The overall gem rate of 6.8%, obviously buoyed up by those 4 PSA 10s, but this is one of those cards that I think should be submitted a lot more often. People overlook the Leaf Gold set from 1992. In my mind, the best parallel set from 1992, which was really the first year of true parallel sets. The next one up is the 1992 Studio Heritage set. And this is a group of cards, but not the whole set. For whatever reason, numbers 9 to 14 are incredibly hard to get in gem mint condition, especially compared to numbers 1 through 8 in the same set. 9 through 14 includes guys like Andre Dawson, Andy Van Slyke, Paul Molitor, Jeff Bagwell, Darren Dalton, and Kirby Puckett. So there's no lack of stars here. The overall gem rate for the insert set is about 30.6%, but for whatever reason, cards 9 through 14 have had 0 gem mints so far. That includes 16 to PSA with 3 9s as the best. SGC has had 2 with an SGC 8 the best. BGS has had 3 submitted with 2 9s, and none have been graded by CGC. I'm really curious about this one. I'm not sure if it's how it was printed, how it was cut, but this one really is fascinating me, the vast disparity between the first 8 cards and the last 6. And the next one on my list is more of a rare card, but I still wanted to mention it because it is unusual. That's a 1993 Finest Refractors Bernie Williams card. Bernie Williams is not likely to get into the Hall of Fame, but he still was a star player, a key player for those 1990s, early 2000s Yankee teams. So he's pretty popular. And the 93 Finest Refractors is one of the most popular sets of the 1990s. Not exactly junk wax, but still in that era. So I wanted to at least highlight it. There have been 146 of Bernie Williams cards submitted to PSA, and there's 47 of those that are PSA 9s, but a whopping 0 gem mints. And these are difficult to gem, but if you look through all the other cards in this set, there are at least a handful of every card out there that have gotten gem mints, but not the Bernie Williams. SGC has had 10 submitted with 2 9s, BGS has had 9 submitted with 2 9s, and none have been graded by CGC. So again, very interesting to see a card so difficult to gem compared to the other ones in the same set. Now moving on, we talked about the 92 Fleer sets. 93 Fleer wasn't much better. And it's likely due to all the black borders and the gold foil that they used, very similar to the Jeff Kent card that I talked about from 92 Leaf. Golden Moments is one of those. They have 26 submitted to PSA with 110. That's a George Brett 3000th hit card. Major League Prospects was another subset that had that black border with the gold foil. It has 2 PSA 10s out of 38, one for Pedro and none for Mike Piazza. But the set that I want to really focus on is the very popular Provision set, similar to the 91s, but there's not as many available of the 93 version. It's got 0 gem mints out of the 6 different cards in the set and the 14 total that have been submitted. But let's put all 3 of those sets together. PSA Pop 71 across all 3 with 2 PSA 10s. SGC 11 total with no gems. SGC 95 is the highest. BGS Pop of 29 with no gems, only 3 BGS 9s. And the CGC Pop of 3 with again no gems, highest being CGC 8.5. So the overall gem rate from these 90-93 Fleer insert sets, the 3 that we talked about, is 1.8%. Pretty on line with how poor it was in 1992 as well, but making it really difficult to find these cards if you collect these players in high grades. Now the next one is a 1993 Pinnacle Team Pinnacle insert set. The Team Pinnacle cards can go for a high cost if you can find them in PSA 10s, but there's one year in particular that they are incredibly hard to find, and that's 1993. The total PSA population from that year is 71 submitted with only 2 10s for a gem rate of 2.8%. SGC has had 4 submitted with 3 SGC 8s as the best grade. BGS has 30 submitted with 5 8.5s as the best grades. And CGC has had 2 submitted with CGC 7 being the best grade, making the overall gem rate of the 1993 Tim Pinnacle 1.9%. Pretty difficult to find, especially with some key Hall of Fame players in this set. Now the next one on the list is a little bit higher in the gem rate compared to what we've been looking at, and we're going to start to see that going forward. As you get into the mid-90s, a lot of that quality control improved. But they're still pretty cool key sets with a lot of great players, so I still wanted to highlight a couple of them. 1993 Select had the Aces insert set, which was a pretty phenomenal first time we've seen these types of cards out there. The total PSA population is 100 submitted for grading with 9 PSA 10s, a 9% gem rate. SGC has had 29 with 5 10s, BGS has had 17 submitted with 5 9s only, and CGC has had 1, which got an 8.5 grade. The overall gem rate across all the companies is 9.5% for all the Select Aces. The next card's up. 1993 Upper Deck Walter Use Collection. These are by no means rare, but these are beautiful looking cards. Photos border to border around the same time the Stadium Club was getting popular as well. But again, very prone, especially to chipping. The total PSA population here is 286 submitted for grading, with only 27 PSA 10s, giving it a gem rate of about 9.4%. SGC has had 40 submitted with only 110, gem rate of 2.5, and BGS has had 34 submitted with only 5 BGS 9s, but it does have one BGS 10 pristine of Nolan Ryan. Just like that Frank Thomas we talked about, I can't imagine what a Nolan Ryan collector would pay for this card. And CGC has had one submitted as well from the Walter Hughes collection, but only got a grade of 8, giving this an overall gem rate from all the companies of 8.1%. Beautiful cards, really hard to find in good condition. And not leaving Upper Deck from 93, we've got the Then and Now insert set as well. These have a ton of really great players, including a lot of retired players. So they're popular and even harder to find in gem mint condition. The total PSA population is 922 graded, with only 33 PSA 10s, giving it a gem rate of 3.6%. SGC is at 145 graded, with only 2 10s, for a gem rate of 1.4%. BGS has had 273 submitted with 11 9.5s, giving it a gem rate of 4%. And CGC has had one submitted, which it got a 10, so a pretty good gem rate of 100% there. But you look overall gem rate of all 4 grading companies, it's 3.5% for these Then and Now cards. Pretty tough. Next one up is the 1994 Leaf Gold Stars Frank Thomas. There's others too in this set, like Roberto Alomar, Barry Bonds, and Fred McGriff, that are difficult, but the Frank Thomas is the one that really stood out to me. There's a total of 57 of these submitted PSA, with only 10 PSA 9s, so no gem mints. SGC has had 8 submitted, with 2 of them getting 9.5s. BGS has had 7 submitted, with 4 being the best grade of 8.5, and none have been graded by CGC. So for Frank Thomas and 1994 Leaf Gold Stars, which is a beautiful set, there are 0 gem mints available for Frank Thomas. 1995 Leaf Gold Stars has very similar issues as well, although that's again getting another step away from the junk wax era, and a lot of people might say that the 94 Leaf Gold Stars really isn't junk wax anymore. These are really great looking cards. But even so, the Frank Thomas from this set is incredibly difficult to find in good condition. Next one on my list is 1994 Leaf Limited Gold Stars. These are incredibly hard to find across the board, every player, and there's some key players in this set as well. A total PSA population of the whole set of 441, with 13 of those PSA 10s for a gem rate of only 2.9%. SGC has had 78 submitted, with only 2 of them getting 9.5 as the highest grade. BGS has had 73 submitted, with only 3 of those getting 9.5s, which is the gem mint grade. And CGC has had 19 submitted, with only 6 of them getting the best grade of 9. The overall gem rate here is 2.6%. All right, we're getting to the end here. 1994 Score Billy Wagner Gold Rush. I opened a box of this last year, and I know exactly why it's hard. First of all, not a lot of people were grading Billy Wagner in the mid-90s, early 2000s. It didn't become obvious until just in the recent year or two that he was going to make the Hall of Fame. So a lot of collectors probably didn't protect his rookie cards very closely. Couple that with, now that you go back and open 94 Score from now, those cards are mostly going to be bricked together and incredibly hard to separate without peeling cards onto each other. So even with the base, there have been 18 graded by a PSA with 4 10s, but it's even worse when you look at the Gold Rush parallel set. All of that foil on top is really difficult to get in gem mint condition. There's been a total PSA population of 18 cards submitted for grading, with 9 of them getting 9s at least, but 0 10s. SGC is graded 3, and all of them have gotten SGC 9. BGS is graded 4, only 1 of them got a BGS 9, and none have been graded by CGC. I would love to see more of these cards get submitted for grading if they're in good condition, but I have a feeling it's going to be really hard to find any gem mints at this point if you're opening boxes. Next one up, 1994 Ultra Hitting Machines and Home Run Kings. I put both of these together. They're incredibly hard again because of all that black around the borders and a lot of chipping. If I separate them out first, PSA has a population of 51 hitting machines with 3 10s, a 5.9% gem rate. For the home run kings, PSA has a population of 95, so almost twice as much, but they only have 5 PSA 10s for a gem rate of 5.3. SGC is graded a total of 28 from both of these sets and only has 1 SGC 10 to show for it. BGS is graded 18 with 5 9s being the best, and CGC has graded 3 from both these sets with 8.5 being the best grade. An overall gem rate from all of these companies of 4.6% across both the hitting machines and the home run kings. And finally, last card on my list. This is really stretching it for the junk wax era, but it's the 1995 Bowman foil Scott Rowland. Both the base and the gold versions are incredibly tough. If you look at PSA, they've graded 819 of the base with only 17 PSA 10s for a gem rate of 2.1%. For the gold, they've graded 224 with only 7 10s for a 3.1% gem rate. SGC is not much different. 109 for the base, only 110. 35 for the gold, only 4 9.5s. BGS, 237 for the base with only 13 9.5s. 82 for the gold with only 7 9.5s. So a bit of a higher gem rate there coming out of BGS. But we all know that that probably includes a lot of cards that have 3 9.5s and 1 9 subgrade. So you might expect it to be similar to an SGC 9.5 or a PSA 9. And CGC has graded 13 base cards with only 5 9s and 6 gold cards, but 2 of those have actually gotten CGC 10 grades, which is pretty outstanding. That gives these cards an overall gem rate of 2.6% for the base card and 4.6% for the gold. This is something I think is really important because when a lot of people have been looking for Scott Rowland rookie cards once he got into the Hall of Fame, his Bowman's best cards cost a lot more money than his Bowman. But I think it should really be the other way around. For his Bowman's best, there were 2,367 submitted to PSA for grading, and 214 of those got 10s. You compare the Bowman base across the board to the Bowman's best base, it's no doubt in my mind that I would pay more for the Bowman than I would for the Bowman's best. But that's not how the hobby typically sees it. And that is one reason why I wanted to make this video, to really shine some light on some of these cards that are incredibly low priced. You can actually get them for much lower costs. Like the 94 score Gold Rush Billy Wagner, I was able to pick up a 9 for like 20 bucks in this last month because there's no 10s. But people don't typically do enough research to know that. That 9 should probably be worth way more than it cost me. So put in the comments down below your thoughts on these cards and why they're so hard to gem, and point out any other ones you think I might have missed. In the meantime, keep talking baseball, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you around.